The courtroom was a stark and sterile environment, the air thick with tension as the judge, a stout man with an air of superiority, sat perched behind the polished mahogany bench. The walls were lined with dark wood paneling, and the flickering fluorescent lights cast an unflattering glow over the proceedings. In this setting, the Filipina woman stood alone at the plaintiff's table, her heart pounding in her chest. She was dressed modestly in a tailored navy blue suit, her dark hair pulled back into a neat bun. Despite her efforts to present herself professionally, she sensed the skepticism radiating from the judge and onlookers. As she prepared to speak, she could feel their eyes on her, some scrutinizing her attire, others dismissing her based solely on her ethnicity. It was a familiar feeling, one that had plagued her throughout her life. As she began to present her case, detailing the injustices she faced, she noticed the judge's expression shift from mild interest to thinly veiled amusement. He chuckled softly, leaning back in his chair as if he were watching a poorly scripted play unfold before him. "Is this really what we have to deal with today?" he quipped, his voice dripping with condescension. A ripple of laughter spread through the gallery, a mix of disbelief and derision, as if they were all complicit in this mockery. The woman's cheeks flushed with humiliation, she fought back tears that threatened to spill over. This wasn't just about her case. It felt like a personal attack against her identity. She had spent years fighting against prejudice and discrimination in both professional and personal spheres, yet here she was again, underestimated. With every word that left her lips, she could sense the dismissive attitudes weighing heavily against her. The judge's laughter echoed in her mind, drowning out her resolve. She had come here seeking justice, hoping for a fair hearing about the injustices she endured at work. A series of discriminatory practices that not only affected her career but also chipped away at her dignity. As she pressed on with her account of events, the wrongful termination, the biased treatment from colleagues, she could see the judge's attention waning. He fiddled with his gavel absent-mindedly, as though he were merely waiting for the moment when he could call an end to this farce. It was as if he believed that because she was a Filipina woman standing before him, her words held less weight than those of others. But beneath the surface of her anxiety lay an unwavering determination. She had always known that people would underestimate her based on their prejudices. However, what they didn't know was that she had more to offer than what met their eyes. Deep within her purse rested an object that could change everything, a United States Secret Service badge. The moment seemed to stretch indefinitely as she weighed her options. Could revealing such a part of herself change how they saw her? It felt risky, almost reckless, but what choice did she have? The laughter still echoed in her ears like a cruel reminder of how far society still had to go in terms of understanding and acceptance. Taking a deep breath to steady herself against the weight of judgmental stares, she made up her mind. This was not just about winning or losing today. It was about asserting her identity and demanding respect in a space where so many like herself had been silenced. "Your Honor," she said firmly, cutting through the murmurings and laughter that surrounded her. "Before I continue, I must clarify my position." She reached into her purse and pulled out the badge, holding it up for everyone in the courtroom to see, the gleaming emblem reflecting light and authority. The room fell silent as realization swept across every face. Even the judge's expression shifted from amusement to shock. His eyes widened as he recognized what it meant. This woman was not just an ordinary citizen, she was part of an elite agency tasked with protecting national security. For an instant, time froze as everyone absorbed this new information. The judge blinked rapidly as if trying to comprehend how his perception could have been so wrong. The laughter that had once filled the air dissipated like mist under sunlight. "Your Honor," she continued with newfound confidence, "I serve under the United States Secret Service." Her voice was steady now, commanding attention rather than eliciting mockery. "I am here not only seeking justice for myself but also standing against discrimination that impacts countless individuals who may not have a voice." The shift in power dynamics was palpable. It radiated through the courtroom like electricity. The judge straightened in his seat, his demeanor suddenly respectful as he cleared his throat awkwardly. "I see," he said slowly, his tone shifting from condescension to cautious respect. "Please proceed." In those few moments, everything changed. The energy in the room transformed from one of mockery to one of acknowledgement, and respect for authority where it rightfully belonged. The woman felt a swell of empowerment coursing through her veins as she continued to speak passionately about discrimination and its far-reaching consequences. As she laid bare not only her experiences but also those of others who suffered silently under similar biases, it became clear: this courtroom would be a platform for justice rather than ridicule. The laughter that had once stung now seemed like a distant memory overshadowed by a present filled with purpose and resilience. With each word spoken from that point forward, she carved out space for respect, not just for herself but for anyone who faced discrimination simply because they didn't fit someone else's narrow view of worthiness. Today wasn't merely about winning or losing, it would be about justice served, and perhaps even changing hearts along the way. As the courtroom settled into a tense silence, the Filipina woman felt the weight of many pairs of eyes upon her. The judge, still sitting with an air of superiority, leaned forward, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Let's hear what you have to say," he said, his tone dripping with skepticism. The slight smirk on his face made it clear that he was already forming judgments based on her appearance rather than the content of her words. She cleared her throat, trying to steady her nerves. This was her moment, a chance to articulate the injustices she had faced, yet doubt crept into her mind. She had rehearsed this speech countless times, yet here, under the judge's scrutinizing gaze, she felt small and vulnerable. "Your Honor, I am here today to present my case against," she began, only to be interrupted. "Is that so?" The judge chuckled lightly as if she were a child attempting to play at something grown-up. "And what exactly do you think you can achieve here?" His laughter echoed in the room, and a few members of the gallery joined in, a cruel chorus that stung like a slap across her face. The dismissiveness made her stomach churn. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks as their laughter washed over her like cold water. It wasn't just about this case. It was about every instance she had endured where her worth was questioned because of her ethnicity. "Your Honor," she tried again, forcing herself to hold on to her composure. "I'm here to discuss my wrongful termination from my job at XYZ Corporation." She could feel the air grow thicker as she pressed on, detailing the incidents that led to her dismissal, how she was consistently overlooked for promotions despite her qualifications and how colleagues would dismiss her contributions simply because she was a Filipina woman. With each word she spoke, she noticed the judge's expression shift from amusement to mild annoyance. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers impatiently on the bench. "And what makes you think this is a matter worth pursuing? You do realize that discrimination claims require substantial evidence?" The subtle condescension in his voice felt like a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. She had anticipated some resistance, but not this blatant dismissal fueled by bias. It was clear he viewed her through a lens clouded by stereotypes, assuming that because of her background, she lacked the capability or understanding necessary for legal recourse. "I have documentation," she insisted, trying to inject confidence into her words. "Emails from management acknowledging my contributions and statements from colleagues who witnessed." "Witnesses?" The judge cut in sharply, his tone mocking once more. "I doubt anyone would risk their reputation for a case like this." The laughter returned, a low murmur rippling through the courtroom as if they were all complicit in belittling her experience. She felt waves of humiliation wash over her. A knot tightened in her stomach as she fought against tears threatening to spill over. This wasn't just a trial, this was an affront to who she was. In that moment of vulnerability, everything seemed to shift inside her. She recalled how often she had been underestimated, not just in this courtroom but throughout her life. It wasn't just about proving herself, it was about standing up against systemic biases that sought to belittle those who didn't conform to societal standards. Taking a deep breath, she squared her shoulders and met the judge's gaze directly. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "discrimination is not always overt. Sometimes it hides behind condescension and mockery." The words hung in the air like an unspoken challenge. He raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by her sudden boldness. Yet still, there was an underlying current of disbelief etched across his features, a reminder that he couldn't see past his own biases. "You'll have your chance to present your evidence," he replied dismissively but with less bravado than before. "But don't expect me to take your word at face value just because you find yourself offended." At that moment, something ignited within her, a fierce determination born from years of fighting against prejudice and injustice. She could feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface but forced herself to remain calm. "Respect is earned," she said quietly yet firmly. "And I'm here today not only seeking justice for myself but for anyone who has faced similar discrimination." The murmurs quieted momentarily as if they were collectively processing the weight of her words, the realization that they had underestimated not just an individual but also the systemic issues that allowed such attitudes to fester unchecked. Yet despite this flicker of understanding among some members of the gallery, the judge's demeanor remained unchanged. He seemed determined to cling to his preconceived notions rooted in bias and entitlement. "Let's focus on your evidence," he said dismissively after a long pause filled with tension. "We'll see if there's any merit beyond your emotional appeals." That comment cut deeper than any laughter ever could. It was a direct dismissal of both her experiences and identity, as someone worthy of respect and belief. She clenched her fists at her sides, fighting against tears welling up once more. This wasn't merely about winning or losing, it was about asserting herself against all odds, against societal expectations and biases that sought to confine individuals based on their ethnicity or gender. As she prepared to present evidence documenting the discrimination she faced at work, emails that betrayed bias and testimonies from those willing to stand by her side, she realized that while this battle might be difficult and fraught with prejudice, it would also represent something greater, a stand against injustice rooted deeply within society. Today would mark a turning point, not just for herself but for anyone who had ever felt belittled or mocked for being different. And while laughter may have echoed through these walls today, it would soon be transformed into something far more powerful, a call for justice that refused to be silenced any longer. The courtroom was heavy with tension as the judge's dismissive remarks hung in the air like a dark cloud. The Filipina woman stood at the plaintiff's table, her heart pounding in her chest, but beneath the surface, a newfound resolve began to take root. She had spent far too long feeling belittled and underestimated, and now was not the time to back down. In that moment, she took a deep breath, grounding herself in the truth of her experiences. It was as if a switch had flipped. The laughter and mockery that had once threatened to consume her now fueled her determination. She thought of every instance where she had fought against prejudice, not just in this courtroom but throughout her life. Each battle had shaped her into someone who refused to be silenced. "Your Honor," she began again, her voice steadier than before. "I am here not only to present my case but also to challenge the biases that seek to undermine individuals like me." She could feel the weight of the room shift ever so slightly. There was something different about her tone, an unwavering conviction that demanded attention. "I understand that my background may lead some to underestimate my capabilities," she continued, locking eyes with the judge. "But I have worked hard to earn my place in this world and in this courtroom." The judge leaned back slightly, his expression a mix of surprise and irritation at her boldness. The laughter from earlier still echoed faintly in the corners of the room, but it felt less powerful now, as if she had extinguished a flickering flame. She pressed on, recounting her experiences at XYZ Corporation with clarity and conviction. "I have faced discrimination in my workplace, constant microaggressions that chipped away at my confidence and professionalism," she said, her voice rising with passion. "I was overlooked for promotions despite my qualifications and contributions. My efforts were minimized because of who I am." With each word, she painted a picture of the injustices she faced, how colleagues would disregard her ideas during meetings or how management would praise others for work she had done herself. There was strength in her storytelling. It wasn't just about presenting evidence. It was about sharing a narrative that needed to be heard. The gallery remained silent as they absorbed her words, caught up in the intensity of her delivery. She noticed a few nodding along, perhaps recognizing their own struggles within her story. The shift in energy was palpable. They were beginning to see her not just as a Filipina woman but as someone with a valid claim and a voice worth hearing. Discrimination is not always loud, sometimes it whispers. She continued, drawing on her own experiences to emphasize systemic issues often overlooked. It hides behind condescension and mockery, which is exactly what I encountered today. The judge shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly taken aback by her directness. But instead of retreating into defensiveness, he seemed to reconsider his posture slightly. Perhaps there was more to this woman than he had initially presumed. Your Honor, she pressed forward, I urge you to look beyond your biases and consider the evidence I will present. This is not just about me, it's about every individual who has faced similar challenges because of their ethnicity or gender. In that moment, something shifted within her, a sense of empowerment blossoming like a flower breaking through concrete. She knew that revealing herself fully would be crucial. There was no longer room for self-doubt or hesitation. As she prepared for the next phase of her argument, she remembered the badge tucked away in her purse, the United States Secret Service badge that represented not only authority, but also an unwavering commitment to justice and protection. It was time to reveal this hidden identity, but first, she needed to lay down the foundation of respect and acknowledgement. Justice is not merely an ideal, it is something we must actively pursue, she declared, locking eyes with several members of the gallery who were now fully engaged in her narrative. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect regardless of their background. She took another steadying breath before continuing. Today I stand here as both a victim of discrimination and an advocate for change. Her heart raced with anticipation as she prepared for what would come next, an unveiling that would shift everything. The judge appeared conflicted as he processed her words. He opened his mouth as if to respond but hesitated. His brow furrowed slightly, a sign that perhaps he was wrestling with his own biases and assumptions about who deserved respect within these walls. I have documentation, she said firmly, pulling out copies of emails and witness statements from colleagues who supported her claims. These documents illustrate not just my experiences but highlight a pervasive culture of discrimination within XYZ Corporation. As she began laying out each piece of evidence meticulously before the court, emails that contained dismissive remarks from management and testimonials from coworkers who witnessed unfair treatment, she could sense a shift occurring among those present. The atmosphere began to change as murmurs spread through the gallery. A blend of disbelief and understanding washed over them like waves breaking on shore. They were starting to see beyond their initial judgments. They began recognizing the weight of what she had endured. Your Honor, she said again, looking directly at him. It's vital that we acknowledge these realities if we are ever going to foster true equity within our workplaces. The judge sat up straighter, his demeanor shifting yet again as he absorbed both her evidence and resolve. Her words held power now, a powerful reminder that while biases might attempt to diminish one's worth, they could never erase an individual's story or their fight for justice. With renewed confidence coursing through her veins, she realized that this courtroom was more than just a battleground for rights. It was also an opportunity for growth, for herself and for those witnessing this pivotal moment unfold. I may be underestimated because of my ethnicity, she concluded passionately. But today I'm here to reclaim my narrative, to demand respect for myself and everyone who has faced similar injustices. Her determination resonated deeply within the walls that had once echoed with laughter. Now they reverberated with acknowledgement and respect, a testament to resilience against prejudice standing tall amidst adversity. As she prepared for the next steps, readying herself for the moment when she would reveal the badge, the seed of change had been planted firmly in that courtroom soil, watered by courage and conviction blossoming into something beautiful, hope for justice where it was long overdue. As the tension in the courtroom escalated, the Filipina woman felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety coursing through her veins. She had just laid bare her experiences, fighting against the patronizing laughter that had initially greeted her. Yet she knew that to truly shift the dynamics in this room, she needed to reveal her hidden identity, the one that could turn the tide and command respect. With a steadying breath, she glanced down at her purse, where the badge rested like a secret weapon waiting to be unleashed. It was time. The moment she had been preparing for was upon her. This was not merely about proving her worth. It was about showcasing her authority and demanding acknowledgement in a space that had so quickly sought to diminish her. "Your Honor," she began again, her voice firm and unwavering. "Before we proceed further, I believe it's essential for you to understand who you are dealing with." The gravity of her words hung in the air like a thick fog, drawing every eye in the room toward her. She reached into her purse, her fingers brushing against the cool metal of the badge. As she pulled it out, she felt an electric charge ripple through her body, a surge of empowerment that came from knowing she was more than what others saw. With a deliberate motion, she held the badge up for everyone to see. "Permit me to introduce myself properly," she continued, raising the badge high enough for both the judge and those in attendance to recognize its significance. "I am an agent of the United States Secret Service." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery as realization dawned on them. The atmosphere shifted dramatically. Where there had been mockery and disbelief just moments before, now there was awe and confusion. The judge's eyes widened as he processed what this revelation meant. This was no ordinary woman standing before him. She wielded authority far beyond what he had assumed. "An agent?" he stammered, his voice betraying a hint of disbelief as he leaned forward in his chair. The smirk that had graced his face earlier vanished entirely, replaced by an expression of cautious respect mixed with surprise. "Yes," she replied confidently, holding the badge steady in front of him. "The United States Secret Service is tasked with protecting both national security and individuals under threat. I have dedicated my career to upholding justice and ensuring safety for all citizens." The judge's demeanor shifted palpably. He straightened his posture and cleared his throat, suddenly aware of the weight of his previous judgments. I see," he said slowly, his tone shifting from condescension to one tinged with respect. "This changes things." Indeed, it did change everything. The laughter that had once echoed through the courtroom was replaced by an uncomfortable silence as attendees absorbed this new information. Her colleagues who had once taken pride in belittling her were now grappling with their own assumptions. "I am not merely here as a victim seeking justice," she continued, emboldened by their reactions and reassured by the gravity of her position. "I stand here as someone committed to combating discrimination in all its forms, regardless of who it targets." The judge nodded slowly, clearly reconsidering his earlier stance. "Please proceed," he said more earnestly now, indicating that he understood this was no longer just about her case but also about acknowledging a broader issue of bias and discrimination. With renewed vigor, she began to lay out her evidence once more, emails from management that reflected discriminatory practices and witness statements from colleagues ready to stand by her side at last. But now there was a palpable shift in how these documents were received. They were no longer dismissed but rather viewed through a lens of understanding and respect. The gallery listened intently as she spoke passionately about equity and justice, not just for herself but for anyone who had ever felt marginalized or belittled because of their background or identity. She could see heads nodding in agreement. Some members even exchanged glances filled with newfound recognition of their own biases. "Your Honor," she continued with determination, "discrimination is not always loud or overt. It can be insidious, hidden behind smiles or polite conversation. But it is real and damaging nonetheless." Each word resonated deeply within those present, including the judge who seemed genuinely moved by her conviction. He sat forward again now, actively listening rather than judging from a distance. With each piece of evidence presented alongside her passionate narrative, she began to dismantle not only the biases surrounding her case but also those ingrained within societal structures, those biases that often went unchallenged. "I believe we have a responsibility to call out injustice wherever we see it," she declared firmly. "It begins with recognizing our own prejudices and striving for change, not just within these walls but in every corner of our lives." The courtroom fell into a thick silence as attendees absorbed this powerful message. A message delivered not only by an agent of authority but also by a woman who had fought tirelessly against discrimination throughout her life. As she concluded her presentation, she felt empowered, not merely because of the badge she held but because of who she had become through adversity. The journey had shaped her into someone capable of commanding respect and igniting change. Today marks not just my fight for justice but also our collective fight against prejudice, she stated firmly while looking directly at the judge. I urge you to consider all individuals deserving of dignity and respect regardless of ethnicity or background. The judge nodded slowly again, his demeanor transformed entirely from earlier mockery to genuine contemplation, a testament to how perspectives could shift when faced with undeniable truth. Thank you for your presentation, he finally said after a long pause filled with reflection. It is clear that your claims deserve serious consideration. In that moment, something profound happened within that courtroom. The power dynamics had shifted irrevocably. No longer was this woman simply an underestimated Filipina facing discrimination. Instead, she emerged as a force to be reckoned with, a beacon of resilience standing tall against prejudice. As the session resumed with renewed focus on justice rather than ridicule, it became evident that this courtroom would be forever changed by one woman's resolve, a resolve fortified by truth shining brightly amidst darkness, and perhaps even paving the way for others who would follow in her footsteps toward equality and respect. The moment the Filipina woman revealed her United States Secret Service badge, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted dramatically. The initial laughter and mockery that had defined the proceedings melted away, replaced by a palpable tension as everyone absorbed the significance of her identity. The judge, who had once leaned back in his chair with an air of superiority, now sat upright, his demeanor transformed from condescension to one of cautious respect. Agent, he began, his voice steadier than before. I appreciate your service to this country. There was a newfound gravity in his tone that contrasted sharply with how he had treated her moments earlier. The subtle acknowledgement of her authority was a turning point, not just for her case but for the entire courtroom. She felt a surge of empowerment coursing through her veins. This wasn't just about proving herself, it was about redefining what authority looked like in this space. The judge's shift in attitude signified more than just a change in tone. It represented a collective awakening among those present. They were beginning to see her not merely as an underestimated Filipina woman but as a formidable figure wielding authority and expertise. As she stood at the plaintiff's table, she could feel the energy in the room transform. It was as if a spotlight had been turned on, illuminating the biases that had pervaded the proceedings thus far. The murmurs of disbelief and confusion rippled through the gallery as attendees processed this new information, their perceptions rapidly evolving. Your Honor, she said, feeling emboldened by the change in energy, I stand before you today not only to seek justice for myself but also to represent countless others who have faced discrimination and prejudice. Her voice rang clear and confident, resonating with a strength that seemed to fill the space around her. The judge nodded slowly, his expression now one of contemplation rather than mockery. Please continue, he said earnestly, indicating that he was prepared to listen, not just to her claims but also to the underlying issues that fueled them. With renewed vigor, she began to elaborate on her experiences at XYZ Corporation, detailing how institutional biases had perpetuated unfair treatment. She recounted specific instances where her contributions were minimized or disregarded entirely because of her ethnicity. Stories that had once been met with derision were now being acknowledged with serious consideration. Discrimination often hides behind assumptions, she said passionately. It lives in the spaces where people are dismissed based solely on their appearance or background. Her words hung in the air, resonating deeply within those present. The gallery was no longer filled with judgmental stares. Instead, she saw faces softening with understanding. There were nods of agreement from some. Others exchanged contemplative glances as they began to grapple with their own implicit biases. The shift in power dynamics had opened a door for dialogue, a chance for collective reflection on attitudes that often went unchallenged. The judge leaned forward slightly, genuinely engaged. Agent, he addressed her respectfully now. What do you suggest we do moving forward? How can we ensure that such biases are addressed within not only your case but also within our legal system? His inquiry was unexpected but welcomed. It signaled a willingness to engage constructively rather than dismissively. She sensed that he was no longer viewing this as an isolated incident but rather as part of a larger conversation about discrimination and justice. I believe it's essential to establish clear protocols regarding discrimination claims, she responded thoughtfully. We need training programs that raise awareness about implicit bias and promote inclusivity, both in workplaces and within our legal system. As she spoke, she could see others in the courtroom taking notes, lawyers jotting down points and members of the gallery engaged in earnest discussion amongst themselves. The once hostile environment was transforming into one ripe for understanding and growth. The judge nodded again, acknowledging her suggestions while weighing their implications. "Thank you for your insights," he said with genuine appreciation. "It's clear that this case extends beyond personal grievances. It's about fostering an environment where all individuals feel valued." In that moment, she realized that this courtroom had become a microcosm of society, a place where prejudices could be challenged and transformed into opportunities for learning and growth. The power dynamics had shifted not just for her but for everyone present. They were now participants in a critical dialogue rather than passive observers. With each piece of evidence she presented, emails from management reflecting discriminatory practices and statements from colleagues willing to testify on her behalf, she could feel the walls built by bias begin to crumble. The judge's demeanor continued to evolve. He listened intently as if finally recognizing the importance of these narratives. "I am here today not just seeking justice for myself," she reiterated passionately, "but advocating for anyone who has ever felt diminished because of who they are." Her words echoed through the courtroom like a rallying cry, a reminder that change could begin here and now. As she concluded her presentation with heartfelt conviction, she felt a sense of fulfillment wash over her. This wasn't merely about winning a case. It was about igniting change, a spark that could potentially light up dark corners within society plagued by discrimination. The judge finally turned to address those gathered in the gallery. "I want to thank everyone here today for engaging in this important discussion," he said earnestly. "It is vital that we learn from these experiences and work toward building more equitable systems." A wave of applause erupted from the audience, a mixture of respect for her courage and acknowledgement of their collective responsibility moving forward. She smiled, feeling both relieved and empowered by the support surrounding her. In that moment, all notions of prejudice seemed distant. Instead, there was hope, a belief that justice could prevail when individuals stood together against bias. The power dynamics in the courtroom had fundamentally changed. No longer were they defined by laughter or dismissal but by respect and shared commitment to ensuring fairness for all. As the proceedings resumed with renewed focus on equity rather than ridicule, it became clear, this Filipina woman was not just fighting for herself, she had become a catalyst for change, a symbol of resilience standing tall against adversity, and perhaps even lighting the way toward a brighter future where respect reigned supreme over prejudice. The atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted dramatically. The laughter that had once filled the room had been replaced by an electrifying tension, a palpable acknowledgement of the Filipina woman's authority following her revelation as a United States Secret Service agent. She could feel the change as she stood tall at the plaintiff's table, no longer just fighting for her case but for something much larger, a command of respect that she had long sought and deserved. As she continued to present her evidence, she realized that the judge's initial mockery had transformed into genuine engagement. He leaned forward, listening intently to her words, his previous assumptions crumbling beneath the weight of her credentials and the gravity of her experiences. The power dynamics in the courtroom were no longer skewed against her but were now a reflection of her strength and resolve. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady and assertive, "I appreciate your willingness to hear me out. It's important to understand that discrimination does not just harm individuals, it erodes trust within our communities and workplaces." As she spoke, she looked around the courtroom, meeting the eyes of those present, lawyers, spectators, even court personnel, each one absorbing her message. The judge nodded slowly, clearly processing the implications of her words. "I can see that you are not only here to seek justice for yourself but also to highlight systemic issues that need addressing," he replied thoughtfully. His tone suggested a newfound understanding, a recognition that this case was about more than just legal proceedings. It was about challenging deeply ingrained biases. Emboldened by his response, she pressed on. "Discrimination often manifests in subtle ways, through microaggressions, dismissive comments, or even outright exclusion. I've experienced these firsthand at XYZ Corporation. Her voice resonated with conviction as she presented specific examples of how her contributions had been undermined due to prejudiced attitudes. As she shared her story, she could see faces in the gallery beginning to shift from skepticism to empathy. Some members nodded along as if recalling similar experiences in their own lives, an unspoken acknowledgement that they too had witnessed or faced discrimination. The transformation was powerful. She was no longer an isolated figure but a voice for many who had felt marginalized. Your Honor, she continued, the issue at hand extends beyond my personal grievances. It reflects a culture that allows biases to fester unchecked. It's imperative we address these issues head-on if we wish to foster an environment of respect and inclusion. With each statement, she commanded respect not through force but through clarity and authenticity. The badge she held was no longer just a symbol of authority. It represented the culmination of her experiences and struggles against prejudice. The judge's demeanor further softened as he listened intently. You make an important point about the need for cultural change within organizations, he said, his tone now serious and reflective. What do you propose as steps we can take moving forward? In that moment, she felt a surge of empowerment wash over her. This was what she had fought for, a platform where her voice would be valued and respected. I believe we need to implement mandatory training programs focused on diversity and inclusion, she suggested confidently. Organizations must prioritize creating safe spaces for dialogue where individuals can share their experiences without fear of retaliation. The judge jotted down notes, while looking at her with newfound respect. It was clear he was considering her proposals thoughtfully, weighing their implications within both the context of her case and broader societal norms. As she continued outlining additional recommendations, such as establishing clear reporting mechanisms for discrimination claims and fostering mentorship programs, she could sense the momentum building in the courtroom. Attendees were engaged. They listened with rapt attention as if hearing these ideas for the first time. Moreover, she added passionately, it's essential that we hold individuals accountable for discriminatory behavior, regardless of their position within an organization. We must cultivate environments where everyone feels valued, not just those who fit a certain mold. With each word spoken, she felt more confident. This was more than mere advocacy. It was a call for transformation rooted in justice and mutual respect. The judge seemed increasingly receptive to her ideas, nodding thoughtfully as he processed how these changes could be integrated into existing frameworks. At that moment, it became clear, this wasn't just about one woman's fight for justice. It was about igniting a movement, a shift toward equity within workplaces and communities everywhere. She was no longer just advocating for herself, she had become an agent of change. Your Honor, she concluded, looking directly at him with unwavering determination. We stand on the precipice of an opportunity, not only to address my case but also to inspire others who have been silenced or overlooked due to their backgrounds. Her voice resonated with strength as she made eye contact with various members of the gallery who seemed energized by her words. The judge finally turned to address everyone present in the courtroom. I appreciate your insight today, he said earnestly, his tone reflective rather than dismissive. It is vital that we take these discussions seriously, not just for this case but as part of our ongoing commitment to justice. Applause erupted from the gallery, a spontaneous expression of solidarity with her message. In that moment, it felt like barriers were breaking down. People were coming together in support of a shared vision for equity and respect. The woman smiled softly at the response. This was what it meant to command respect, not through conformity but through authenticity and courage. She had transformed an environment once marred by prejudice into one filled with potential for growth and understanding. As proceedings resumed with renewed focus on equity rather than ridicule or dismissal, there was a sense of hope hanging in the air, a belief that change could indeed happen when individuals stood together against bias and injustice. Her journey hadn't just been about winning a legal battle, it had become a testament to resilience, the ability not only to face adversity but also to rise above it with dignity and strength. She emerged from this experience not simply as a victim seeking justice but as a powerful advocate inspiring others to challenge discrimination wherever it existed. In that courtroom filled with possibility and hope, one Filipina woman had commanded respect, not only reclaiming her narrative but also paving the way toward a brighter future forged through understanding and mutual respect among all individuals. The atmosphere in the courtroom had transformed. What began as a hostile environment filled with mockery and skepticism was now charged with anticipation and respect. The Filipina woman, having revealed her identity as a United States Secret Service agent, felt a sense of empowerment radiate from her very core. She had commanded respect not just for herself but for the countless individuals who had faced discrimination and prejudice. As the judge prepared to deliver his ruling, the tension in the room was palpable. Attendees leaned forward in their seats, clearly invested in the outcome of this case. The woman stood at the plaintiff's table, her heart racing with a mixture of hope and anxiety, knowing that this moment would be pivotal not only for her but for others who shared similar experiences. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, the judge began, his voice steady and authoritative. It is evident that discrimination occurred at XYZ Corporation against Agent, her name. A wave of relief washed over her as she heard those words. It was validation for all the struggles she had endured. The judge continued, detailing how the evidence she had provided, emails documenting dismissive behavior from management and testimonies from colleagues, painted a clear picture of a workplace environment plagued by bias. He acknowledged how her experiences were reflective of broader issues affecting many within marginalized communities. Discrimination is not merely an individual grievance, it is a systemic issue that requires our attention, he said, addressing everyone in the courtroom. We must work collectively to create environments where every individual feels valued and respected. Applause erupted from the gallery, echoing through the courtroom as people showed their support for not only her victory but also for the judge's acknowledgement of deeper societal issues. She felt tears prick at her eyes, not out of sorrow but from a profound sense of triumph. This was more than just a personal win, it was a step toward justice for all who faced similar challenges. Therefore, the judge continued, drawing everyone's attention back to him. I am ordering XYZ Corporation to implement mandatory diversity and inclusivity training programs. Furthermore, they will need to establish clear reporting mechanisms for discrimination claims to ensure that no employee feels unsafe or silenced. A cheer broke out among supporters in the gallery, as they recognized that this ruling could pave the way for meaningful change within workplaces everywhere. The woman felt a swell of gratitude and pride. This wasn't just about her case anymore. It was about setting a precedent that could impact countless others. The judge turned back to her, his expression sincere. Agent, her name, your courage to stand up against discrimination not only serves your interests, but also ignites hope for others who feel marginalized. You have shown us that change is possible when we refuse to remain silent. She smiled through her tears, nodding in appreciation for his words. This wasn't simply about winning. It was about bringing light to issues that often lurked in shadows, unchallenged and ignored. Her journey had been fraught with obstacles, but every step had led her here, to a moment where justice rang true. I wish to express my gratitude, she began, addressing both the judge and everyone present. This victory is not mine alone, it belongs to all those who have faced discrimination and injustice. With each word she spoke, she could feel the energy in the room shift once again, this time toward solidarity and unity against bias. Her voice resonated with strength as she continued. May we make it our mission to foster an environment where respect reigns over prejudice. The applause intensified as her sentiments echoed through the courtroom, resonating with those who understood what it meant to fight for justice. The power dynamics established earlier were no longer relevant. Instead, there was a collective acknowledgement that justice required ongoing effort from all sides. The judge wrapped up proceedings by reiterating his commitment to ensuring that justice would be upheld moving forward. Let this case serve as a reminder that discrimination will not be tolerated in any form, he declared firmly. It is our duty to advocate for equity and inclusivity. As she exited the courtroom alongside her supporters, she felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment wash over her. She had not only fought against personal prejudice but had also become an advocate for systemic change, a catalyst igniting conversations about discrimination that needed to be had. Outside the courthouse steps, reporters gathered around her, eager to capture her story, the triumph of one woman standing tall against adversity while shining light on issues that affected many. She shared her journey candidly with them, emphasizing how vital it was for everyone to stand against discrimination. "Every voice matters," she stated passionately into the cameras. "We must continue fighting for justice until our workplaces reflect true equality, a place where everyone can thrive regardless of their background." Her words resonated deeply with those listening. They embodied hope and resilience, a reminder that justice could prevail even amidst adversity when individuals united their voices against prejudice. As she walked away from the courthouse surrounded by supportive friends and allies, she knew that this was just the beginning of something greater than herself. It was about creating lasting change, not merely within one organization but across society as a whole. In that moment of victory and resolution, she felt empowered knowing she had made a difference rooted in courage, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to fighting against injustice wherever it may arise. Together with those who stood beside her, those who believed in equity and respect, she embarked on a journey toward transformation where every individual could flourish without fear or prejudice standing in their way. This journey would continue beyond these walls. It would ripple outward like waves across oceans, reminding all that justice is worth fighting for, and together they could forge paths toward brighter futures filled with hope, acceptance, and understanding for generations yet unborn. As the Filipina woman stepped away from the courthouse, a sense of accomplishment coursed through her. She had fought valiantly against prejudice and emerged victorious, not only for herself but for others who had faced similar discrimination. Yet, as she walked down the steps and into the bustling street, she found herself reflecting on the broader implications of her journey. The applause still echoed in her ears, a powerful reminder of how far she had come. But with victory came the responsibility to reflect on the prejudices that had been laid bare throughout her experience. She thought about the laughter that had once filled the courtroom, a painful reminder of how quickly people could dismiss others based solely on their appearances or backgrounds. As she made her way through the crowd, she recalled the judge's initial reaction, his laughter, rooted in bias against her Filipino heritage. In that moment of mockery, it was clear that he had underestimated her simply because of who she was. But when she revealed her identity as a Secret Service agent, everything changed. It was a stark reminder of how hidden identities can redefine perceptions and alter power dynamics. She paused at a crosswalk, observing the diverse array of faces around her, people from different cultures, backgrounds, and walks of life. Each one carried their own story, their own struggles against prejudice. It was a poignant moment for her. She realized that while she had won this battle, countless others were still fighting theirs in silence. The victory she achieved in court felt significant not just for its immediate impact but as part of a larger movement toward justice and respect for all individuals. Yet, it also illuminated how deeply entrenched biases could harm others who lacked the same platform or visibility. She understood that her journey was intricately linked to those who might never find their voice in a courtroom or receive validation for their experiences. As she continued down the street, memories flooded her mind, the countless times she had experienced discrimination throughout her life. The dismissive remarks from colleagues at work when they overlooked her contributions. The subtle microaggressions that chipped away at her confidence and sense of belonging. Each encounter had shaped her resolve to fight back against injustice, not just for herself but as an advocate for those who felt powerless. In reflecting on those moments, she recognized that prejudice often stems from ignorance, a lack of understanding about different cultures and experiences. It highlighted the need for education and awareness as vital tools in dismantling stereotypes and fostering inclusivity. She felt a renewed sense of purpose. There was much more work to be done beyond the courtroom. She envisioned initiatives focused on creating safe spaces where individuals could share their stories without fear of judgment. Programs aimed at educating people about diversity and inclusion within workplaces could be instrumental in cultivating empathy and understanding among colleagues. There needed to be platforms where conversations about prejudice could thrive, where people could learn from one another and grow together. As she walked past a group of young people engaged in animated conversation, she considered how vital it was to empower future generations to speak out against discrimination. The younger generation held the potential to shape a world where respect and acceptance replaced bias and exclusion. If they were equipped with knowledge and compassion, perhaps they could break down barriers that previous generations struggled against. Her thoughts drifted back to the judge's closing remarks in court, his acknowledgement of systemic issues and his commitment to implementing change within XYZ Corporation. It gave her hope that perhaps this case would serve as a catalyst for transformation not just within one organization but across many sectors grappling with similar challenges. With each step further away from the courthouse, she felt lighter, a blend of pride and determination swelling within her chest. While one chapter had closed with a resounding victory, another was beginning, one that called for ongoing reflection on prejudice and an unwavering commitment to justice. Empowered by this realization, she resolved to continue sharing her story, speaking out not only about her experiences but also amplifying those of others who felt marginalized or silenced. She envisioned workshops where individuals could come together to discuss their struggles openly, a place where people could learn from one another's journeys while forging connections based on shared experiences. In this ever-evolving narrative surrounding discrimination, there was an undeniable urgency to foster dialogue around equity and inclusion. The lessons learned within the courtroom should extend beyond those walls. They should ripple outward into communities everywhere. As she arrived at the local community center, a place where she often volunteered, she felt invigorated by what lay ahead. Here was an opportunity to start conversations about bias directly with those willing to listen, to educate others about the importance of respect and understanding across cultural divides. Stepping inside, greeted by familiar faces ready to engage in meaningful discussions about diversity initiatives, she smiled brightly knowing this was just the beginning of something profound. Together, they would tackle prejudices head-on, transforming ignorance into understanding through shared stories and experiences. Reflecting on everything that had transpired, the challenges faced and battles fought, she understood that every step taken toward justice mattered immensely. Each act of courage contributed to a larger tapestry woven with threads of resilience and hope. In this moment of reflection, surrounded by friends committed to enacting change, she realized that while prejudices might still exist, there was strength in unity, a collective drive toward creating a world where respect triumphed over bias. Empowered by this vision for change, she embraced both the challenges ahead and the promise they held, a future shaped not only by justice but enriched through compassion as individuals stood together against prejudice arm in arm, ready to forge pathways toward understanding and acceptance for all.